The Briley Brothers, the family of killers, a murderous family, working together. Three brothers, with no conscience. Between 1978 and 1979, the Briley Brothers terrorized the city of Richmond, Virginia. Their killings were brutal, random, and carried out with sadistic pleasure. But what makes them truly unique? They grew up in what seemed like a normal family. And yet, their story ended in one of the most terrifying murder sprees in American history. On the surface, the Briley family seemed ordinary. Their father was strict, their mother quiet and submissive. But behind closed doors, chaos ruled. The three brothers, Linwood, James, and Anthony Briley, grew up with a fascination for violence. Linwood, the oldest, was the leader. Smart, manipulative, and dangerous from a young age. At just 16 years old, he committed his first murder, without reason, without remorse. One afternoon, Linwood spotted his elderly neighbor, Orlean Christian, hanging laundry outside. For no reason at all, he picked up a rifle and shot her in the head through her window. She collapsed on her porch, dead. His younger brothers, James and Anthony, looked up to him. Where Linwood was the mastermind, James was the brute force, and Anthony, the youngest, was easily influenced. The killing spree begins, 3 o'clock to 7 o'clock in 1978, the brothers launched their reign of terror. Their targets? Random people, chosen for no reason other than their own twisted pleasure. One night, they broke into the home of William and Virginia Bucher. The couple was tied up, beaten. But at the last moment, the Brileys decided to let them live. A rare moment of mercy. But their next victims wouldn't be so lucky. Just weeks later, they abducted disc jockey John Gallagher, tortured him, and left him for dead in a field. And he was just one of many. The investigation and arrest, 7 o'clock to 10 o'clock Richmond was in panic. The police had no idea who the killers were, until a key witness came forward. Someone had seen the Briley brothers near one of the crime scenes. In September 1979, the police moved in. The brothers were arrested and placed in prison, awaiting trial. But the most shocking part of their story was yet to come. The shocking escape. 10 o'clock to 12 o'clock in 1984, Linwood and James Briley did the unthinkable. They escaped from death row. Using brute force, deception, and a network of criminals, they broke out of the maximum security Mecklenburg Correctional Center. The escape sent shockwaves across the country. A massive manhunt began, and within weeks, both brothers were recaptured. But their story ended just as many expected. Linwood and James Briley were executed in the electric chair. Anthony, the youngest brother, was sentenced to life in prison. Outro and call to action. 12 o'clock to 12:30, a family that killed together ended up behind bars together. But the question remains, how does an entire family fall into such bloodthirsty violence? Were they born to kill, or were they made into monsters? What do you think? Leave your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more true crime stories. A murderous family, bound by blood and violence. Three brothers, raised in the same home, yet completely devoid of conscience. Between 1978 and 1979, the Briley brothers turned Richmond, Virginia, into a hunting ground. Their victims were chosen at random. Their murders were senseless, brutal, and executed with chilling precision. But what made them truly terrifying wasn't just their actions, it was the fact that they killed together. Brothers, acting as a single, merciless unit. No remorse. No hesitation. No humanity. For the people of Richmond, these were the acts of monsters. But the true horror of the Briley brothers' story isn't just what they did, it's how they became what they were. Three children, growing up in what seemed like an ordinary home, turning into killers without remorse. Was it something in their upbringing? A dark force passed down through their family? Or were they simply born evil? To understand the nightmare that unfolded in Richmond, we have to go back to where it all started. The Briley family lived in a quiet neighborhood in Richmond. Their father, James Briley Sr., was a strict but respectable man. He believed in discipline, structure, and order. Their mother, Bertha, was a quiet woman who rarely questioned her husband's authority. To outsiders, they seemed like any other working-class family. But inside the Briley household, something was different. There was an absence of warmth, an absence of love, an absence of normal human emotion. The three Briley boys, Linwood, James Jr., and Anthony, grew up in an environment that, while not openly abusive, was suffocatingly strict and deeply isolating. But rules and punishments didn't shape them into obedient sons. Instead, they developed a fascination with power and control, especially over those who were weaker than them. From an early age, they displayed disturbing signs of cruelty. They started by torturing small animals, setting cats on fire, choking stray dogs, and mutilating birds. To them, it wasn't just fun. It was a game of life and death, where they always held the power. Among the three brothers, Linwood was the leader. He was intelligent but manipulative, calculated, and completely without empathy. Even as a teenager, he had an uncanny ability to control people. James, the middle brother, was different. He was stronger, more violent, more unpredictable. Where Linwood used his mind to dominate, James used brute force. Anthony, the youngest, was the weakest, mentally and emotionally. He followed his older brothers blindly, eager for their approval. Together, they were dangerous. Together, they were unstoppable. The first murder was a test of Linwood's power. One afternoon, in 1971, 16-year-old Linwood Briley was standing by the window of his home, looking out at his neighborhood. That's when he saw Orlean Christian, a 57-year-old woman who lived next door, hanging her laundry outside. She had done nothing to him. She didn't even know she was being watched. But for Linwood, she was a target. Without hesitation, he picked up a rifle, aimed through the window, and pulled the trigger. The bullet struck her in the head, killing her instantly. What makes this moment even more chilling is what happened next. Linwood didn't panic. He didn't run. He simply waited. When the police arrived, he acted surprised, claiming he had heard the gunshot but knew nothing about it. It wasn't until an autopsy was performed that authorities discovered something shocking. The bullet came from above, meaning the shooter had to be in one of the neighboring houses. A search led police straight to Linwood's home. The rifle was found hidden in his room. His cold-blooded lie had failed. Most killers would spend decades behind bars for an unprovoked murder. But Linwood? He was sentenced to just 1 year in juvenile detention. 1 year, for an execution-style killing. When he was released, he returned home as if nothing had happened. But something had changed. He had tasted death, and he liked it. He wasn't alone. His brothers had watched everything. They had seen what he was capable of. And soon, they would join him. By 1978, all three Briley brothers were together again, and this time, they weren't just kids playing with violence. They were a team. They started small, breaking into homes, stealing valuables, robbing local stores. But it wasn't about the money. They weren't struggling to survive. They wanted something else. They wanted to hurt people. Their first known attack was on William and Virginia Bucher, an elderly couple living in Richmond. One night, the Brileys broke into their home, tied them up, and beat them savagely. But just as suddenly as they had attacked, they stopped. They left the couple alive. No one knows why. Maybe they weren't ready to kill together yet. Maybe they just wanted to feel the thrill of control. But soon, that thrill wouldn't be enough. Their next victim was John Gallagher, a local disc jockey who was simply in the wrong place at the wrong time. The Brileys abducted him, forcing him into the trunk of their car. They drove to a secluded area, where they took their time torturing him, laughing as they did it. When they finally killed him, it wasn't out of necessity. It was because they wanted to watch him die. After Gallagher's murder, the killings became routine. Over the next year, the Briley brothers left a trail of bodies across Richmond. Their victims ranged from elderly women to young men. There was no pattern. No connection. No mercy. They didn't just kill, they enjoyed it. They shot victims in their own homes, they strangled others, and in one of the most horrific cases, they set a man on fire while he was still alive. It wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about gain. It was about power. By 1979, Richmond was paralyzed with fear. The police knew they had a serial killer on their hands, but they couldn't catch them. The Brileys were too careful, too unpredictable. It wasn't until a witness came forward that the police finally had a lead. They moved fast. In September 1979, all three brothers were arrested. Most people thought that was the end of the nightmare. But in 1984, something unthinkable happened. Linwood and James Briley escaped from death row. It was one of the most shocking prison breaks in U.S. history. The brothers, along with 4 other inmates, overpowered guards, stole their uniforms, and walked right out of a maximum security facility. The escape triggered a nationwide manhunt. For nearly 3 weeks, the brothers were free men, moving from town to town. But in the end, their luck ran out. They were caught, dragged back to death row, and finally, their reign of terror ended the way it should have. On October 12, 1984, Linwood Briley was executed in the electric chair. His brother James followed on April 18, 1985. Anthony Briley, the youngest, was sentenced to life in prison, where he remains to this day. A family that killed together ended up behind bars together. But the question remains, how does an entire family become so evil? Were they born killers, or did something make them this way? Let me know what you think in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more true crime stories.